Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to have our enemies be able to spawn in automatically. We'll also have multiple types of enemies that'll come in, and in a future video we'll space these out a bit, but you'll also be able to build towers that can fire. And you can see that if enemies sneak through, they can get around and keep going. But you can add in more enemies. You can see your money go up, and we add in a few different things, the details of it. So and if enemies actually reach the edge, they would also get destroyed. So hope you guys are excited, ready to get going for this tower defense part 2. Okay, so once you load your game up, money will start off at 100, but if you run it and you click towers in and then reset, since money is static, it does not reset with just the reset button in the world. You actually have to shut down the Greenfoot scenario, or we're going to create a cheat real quick and have our money display get reset. So do if Greenfoot dot, and we're going to check for the ability to click something. So mouse clicked, and we're going to access an object. So what object? Well, if this object is clicked, meaning the money display, we can quickly reset that and say all we're going to do is have our game.money equal 100 again. Okay, so that's a little cheat that we can now, if we want to run it and just get 100 more, we can keep clicking this all day long and add in whatever we want. But it won't go up because it just equals 100. It's not adding 100. Okay, so what we want to do is try to have these towers, be able to add them in and be able to fire at these enemies that walk the path already. That's from part 1. And so what we need to do is have in our tower class a way to detect these enemies that are coming into their radius in which they can fire. And so what we need to do is import. Greenfoot does not have access to lists, but since you've downloaded Greenfoot, they can access the JDK, Java Development Kit. So you can import java.util.list, and that will allow you to access all the methods that are available within a list, and also just create a list, because that's what we're about to do. So a list is kind of like an array. It stores values in certain places, but the list does not have a finite or an exact amount. It can have, there could be 4, 5, 10, 20 enemies inside of our world, inside of our radius, walking past, and it needs to be able to detect this one, it could detect 5, 10, 20. Okay. So we will write list because we are creating a list, and so you need to declare what that is, and you actually have to have these greater than and less than signs, and you need to put what class you are about to create a list of, and that'll be our enemy class. And then what is our variable? Well, we're gonna have a list of all the enemies, so I'm gonna call them enemies equals one of these gets, and we want to get all the objects. You have actor and you have list and you have int that will be returned to you. So get one object will just return an actor. This will return a list of actors. And so we're going to do get objects in range, meaning that we will have a radius around us. If I scoot this over and I do control space, go down to get objects in range, you can see return all objects within range radius. Okay, and so you can see this is exactly how it is intended to be written. And so when I do just enter there, it automatically pops up, get objects in range. Here's the radius that we want to give it. And this is by pixel size. If you read through the description, so 50 pixels, our tower is 60. So we probably want it to be more than 50 even. Let's give it 100 just to be safe. And the class that we will getting is enemy.class. Okay, and so we're going to create a list that is called enemies, and we're going to be able to get objects in the range of the enemy class. And so instead of a normal if statement, we're going to need to cycle through this list and get all of the enemies. And so we need to have this search for enemy detector to happen multiple times at once, basically, or just be happening in a loop rapidly. So you would need a loop here, and we're going to name this loop of all the enemies detected just one enemy. You could call it each enemy if this is your first time and you want to be specific and know that. So this is each individual enemy that we will search for and give them an individual task. And you do a colon here of all the enemies. So now what we have is basically an if loop that happens for all the enemies that we detect. Okay, and now we need to put enemy detector in the act method, and then we need a way to test to make sure that this is essentially an if statement that happens in a loop. And so what we're doing is we're going to just do a move, and we can test it here, compile. You don't have to do this, but if you run it, you can click some towers in. Eventually we'll have this enemy always right here, and I'll make sure I add that in, and you can see they detect when they're inside the enemy's path. But now we can get rid of that move 3, and we can add in a new projectile. So our projectile hasn't been created, so you should probably have an idea of what we need to do next. Hopefully you understood that we need to create a new actor, because there's nothing similar to the projectile. And so we create a projectile class, other actually. This is a good quick easy ball. You can also import images in like we did with our tower. Okay, so now we'll go into our projectile, and we're just going to have it move forward, okay? And then we're going to control its rotation as it gets inserted into the world. And so we'll have it move faster than those towers moved right there. We can mess with that later, but going back to our towers. Okay, now we need to fire the projectile, and so we need to create a projectile. Set it equal to a new projectile. And this would reference just a new object projectile that we've created here. And so what we're going to need to add this object in, but we are in an actor, so we need to get world. The world has the only capability of adding objects in. Add object. And we need what we're adding in, so projectile, the x value and the y value, and so that can just be simply get x, get y. So we need to set the projectile's rotation. We can do turn towards, and we need to turn towards each one of these enemies. So each enemy dot get x, each enemy dot get y. Don't forget a semicolon right here. Okay. Okay, so if you just go ahead and hold shift down and add in the towers yourself, and we start off with a little bit of something to use to test. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier. You could save the world. And then this is how our world will be every time. Yeah, it's alright if it's off for now. So when we run this, so now our projectiles maybe need to move a little bit faster, but you can see that they're following the spider, or the spider needs to move a little bit slower. Okay, but they are on the path of the spider, but we just need to have them actually hit them. And we could have in our projectile to turn towards an enemy, which we might do a little bit later on. But so let's go ahead and make our spider a little bit slower and our projectile quite a bit faster. Usually I have my projectiles at like 10 in like space shooters, so then you can see that they can hit them a little bit more often, and obviously they're going 60 times per second is how fast we're throwing these projectiles out there. So we can get them to hit. Maybe later we have them move a little bit more in front, but there you go. Okay, so now that our projectiles are going, we need to add them in a little bit slower. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a count. And so you are going to have it be your fire rate, and this will be our most basic fire rate, equals 0 to start off, and we are going to say if fire rate is greater than 9, so if it gets to 10, encapsulate this. Okay. Organize myself a little bit. Okay. We are going to have our fire rate reset to 0, but we need to count our fire rate. And so I'm going to do it the number of times this method is called. And basically that'll just be 60 times per second. But we can say our fire rate will equal 0 if this happens. So this will execute. Fire rate will switch to 0, but it'll still continue through this if statement. If you really want to be particular, I'll go ahead and move it down here, probably a better spot for it, just to make sure that. Okay, so we run it, and you can see it fires a little bit less often. And our projectile will need to, if it gets hit, we need to remove it. Okay, so let's go into our enemy and let's actually organize this a little bit more. We can do a public void move along path. And this way we can actually take this whole method out of the act method, have it be a little bit more organized, and we can say move along path. We can say public void hit by projectile. We can say if is touching, there's enough of a radius around there that those will definitely hit. Projectile.class. So we can't actually do is touching because we want a reference for projectile, so we don't just want if it's touching any old thing in the class. You can make a reference for an actor projectile and set it if it's equal to get one. This is the get one object at offset, or get one intersecting object. Actually, we'll do that. So get one intersecting object. If you're intersecting the projectile.class, that's when it will create a variable for projectile. And so if projectile does not equal null, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to get world dot remove object projectile. So we're going to get the projectile that hit, and we're going to remove it. Okay, and then let's put this in the act method and just see if this works real quick. Okay, so it gets removed, and we're hitting them every time. Okay, so what else we're going to want to do is have our enemy have health. Okay, and so if our enemy needs health, we're going to have a public int health, and we can set it equal to 5 right now. And a little bit later, we can change the health and have it be edited depending on what level we're on and things like that. So. Okay, so every time we're hit by our projectile, so this is hit by projectile, we want our health minus and we'll say, so then since hit by projectile is always running, and basically we're going to have our enemies be removed depending on if they're hit by projectile, we can put if health is less than 1, get world dot remove object, and we're going to remove ourselves. So we're going to remove this. Okay, and so now on the 5th shot, our enemy gets destroyed. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to have us do is if our enemy is destroyed, we're also going to very simply get our money from our my world. Okay, and since that's static, all you have to do in the enemy is say my world is world, and then you can access anything that is static in my world. So then you would have to do world dot money plus equals 50. So we run it. Enemies removed. Now we have 150. Okay. Now let's try to get a wave of enemies coming through. And so instead of having any of this, we will have an integer for time, int world time, I'm going to call it. Now our world time is going to plus plus when we're in the act method. It's going to continuously go on. Okay, and starting off, we can always add towers in. So add towers in will always be there. And then we're going to have a public void spawn wave. So our spawn wave, for now, will just spawn our first wave of enemies. And so in order to do that, we're going to have our if world time modulo 20 equals 0. We can add object. Since we're in the world class, we don't need to do get world. New enemy at location, and so this is where we're going to need to figure out what location that is right here. There is an error, so I'm going to actually / comment that out, and then now we've gotten rid of our original guys, our enemies and towers. So I need to check the enemies, inspect what is their X and more importantly their Y position. So I'm going to put it at 90 flat. This would be 60, so halfway between 120 and 60 would be 90. And so I will change and put that added in. Add enemy. The X value would be, let's do 1. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. And then 90. So then we put spawn wave in the act method. Can you see now we have enemies getting spawned in? I can click. And now we kind of have some semblance of a game. So in order to create different types of creeps, there's a few things that we can do, but we can add in something for our enemy. And so in order to add in a level to say what enemy we want to have out here, we want to have public enemy, which will create a constructor without that void or any return type. It's now a constructor, and we're going to add in int level and say, we could make this an array, but if level equals 1, we are going to, before I put set image in there, our my world needs a value, and so we're going to start off at 1 because that's going to be our wave. But we'll get a numbered value for wave spawn. Actually, might as well do that now. So we'll have int wave number equals 1. So we'll start us off at 1, and this will be wave number. And eventually we'll have our world time have to be after a certain amount of time, it will reset our wave. So let's go ahead and do that now. So if world time modulo, well, if we had wanted to add in and change every 20 waves, let's do modulo 400. We can have our wave number plus plus. So if our level is 1, let's set that image. So our image would be spider. I believe it's set image spider .png. I hope that's what it's called in Greenfoot. Let me check it out. Well, if we run it, yeah, it's still going. So that's good. And then after 20 get added in, we want it to switch and change. So if level is 2, set image to snake.png. I think there's multiple snakes. I don't know if that's going to work exactly, but could not find snake. Well, let's check what it is. So you can always go to set image. Animals. First you need to load up the snake. For whatever reason, I think this one's a little scarier. Could not find snake. Okay, so then you go back, set image. This is called snake 2. So it has to be in this list of the scenario images that have already been uploaded. Basically, they get uploaded, and then once you have them in there, we can use it. So we can do snake 2. Even though there is a snake, it's that other snake. Snake 2 is available to us. So why did we change to snake 2 so fast? In our my world, our world time needed to be divisible by 400. 0 is divisible by 400. So if we just made this 399, it would wait till the count was 399 before it would add in a new snake. That's what we can do for now. We'll probably change this up a little bit later, but see, now we're adding in the snakes, and you can see that we can add more and more, and we need the snakes to, the enemies to be destroyed at the end. And so the reason we had our enemies add in at 1 instead of 0 is because then I can simply remove them at the edge. We need to go to where we're removing them if our health is less than 1, and we need to have an else if is at edge. Then we will check if they're at the edge, and we'll just copy and paste this down here. If you have these both as ifs, it will be searching for the object when the object has already been removed. If you do have this, it needs to be the last thing on your list of things, because if you put hit by projectile above move along path, even in the act method, it would be try to move along the path after you already might remove it when health is less than 1. So you need to make sure that this is the last thing read by Greenfoot in your game. And so I sped it up quite a bit here, just so you can see what happens when you reach the edge of the screen. I need to make sure that it gets removed, and they are. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 of tower defense. In part 3, we're going to go ahead and start making different types of towers that can do different things. We'll create a little shop menu off to the right, where you can actually click on which tower you want to buy for what amount of money. We'll edit the money so it is a little bit more standard on how much you can earn each level of wave. And when we spawn out our enemies, they will come in a wave that is more like a traditional tower defense, where one level will come, there'll be a pause, and you'll need to destroy all the enemies before you can move on to the next level. And we'll also add in a few more levels as well. So we're really getting going in this, and I hope you really like it. And if you do, make sure you hit the like button. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of the new videos, make sure you subscribe to my channel as well. And hope to see you next time. Thanks.